Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Islam in Bhutan has had a relatively limited historical presence, especially when compared to other regions of South Asia. Bhutan, a predominantly Buddhist country, has long been known for its commitment to preserving its unique cultural and religious heritage, which is primarily based on Vajrayana Buddhism. While Bhutan's history with Islam is not as extensive as in other parts of the Indian subcontinent, there have been some interactions, albeit minimal. The introduction of Islam to the Indian subcontinent dates back to the 7th century, brought by Arab traders and missionaries. Over the centuries, Islam gradually spread across South Asia, including what are now India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, countries that are geographically close to Bhutan. However, Bhutan was never a central focus for Islamic missionaries, and the influence of Islam in Bhutan remained very limited, especially given the country's geographical isolation and the strength of its Buddhist culture. Bhutan's geographic isolation, with its rugged mountainous terrain and limited contact with the outside world, played a key role in preserving its distinct cultural and religious identity. For much of its history, Bhutan maintained a closed-door policy, particularly during the 19th and early 20th centuries. This limited exposure to foreign influences, including religions like Islam, further restricted the spread of Islam within the country. Bhutan remained relatively insulated, and its political and cultural landscape remained largely untouched by external religious movements. In more recent times, particularly in the 20th and 21st centuries, Bhutan has opened up to more international influence. As the country has modernized and become more integrated into global networks, there has been an increase in migration and cross-cultural exchanges. Today, Bhutan's Muslim population is largely made up of foreign nationals, primarily from neighboring countries like Nepal and Bangladesh. These migrant workers have contributed to the small but growing Muslim presence in Bhutan, particularly in the southern border areas, where there is more interaction with Muslim-majority countries. However, despite this growth, the Muslim population in Bhutan remains very small in comparison to the overall population, which is overwhelmingly Buddhist. The Muslim population in Bhutan is extremely small and reliable. Detailed statistics about their numbers are not easily available, largely due to the private nature of religious practice in the country. However, based on various reports and estimates, we do know some key details about the Muslim community in Bhutan. The overall Muslim population in Bhutan is estimated to range between 2,000 to 5,000 individuals. This is a very small fraction of Bhutan's total population, which is approximately 800,000 people. Given this, Muslims make up a minority group in a predominantly Buddhist country. The exact number is difficult to pinpoint, as Bhutan does not conduct regular surveys that specifically track religious demographics, particularly for smaller religious communities like Islam. As a result, the numbers are largely based on extrapolation from various reports and surveys, but they give us a rough estimate of the size of the Muslim population in the country. When it comes to religious practices within Bhutan's Muslim population, the overwhelming majority are Sunni Muslims. This is consistent with the broader trend in South Asia, where Sunni Islam is the dominant sect. The Shia Muslim population in Bhutan, if it exists at all, is likely to be extremely small. Shia Islam is a minority sect in South Asia overall, and given the small size of the Muslim population in Bhutan, the presence of Shia Muslims would be negligible, if any. The lack of formal surveys in Bhutan makes it challenging to provide an in-depth breakdown of the Muslim population or to distinguish between the different sects of Islam. Most Muslims in Bhutan belong to migrant communities, with the majority coming from neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, and India. These migrants typically practice Islam in private settings, as public religious expression outside of Buddhism is highly restricted in Bhutan. As a result, the Muslim community often holds private prayers and gatherings, with no formal mosques or Islamic centers available for communal worship. In terms of the religious landscape, Bhutan is primarily a Buddhist country, with Vajrayana Buddhism being the official state religion. While there are some Christian, Hindu, and other religious minorities, Islam remains one of the smallest religious groups in the country. Muslims in Bhutan, due to their small number and the country's predominantly Buddhist culture, lead relatively private lives when it comes to religious activities. Their daily routines and practices are influenced by their faith, but these activities are often carried out discreetly. Given Bhutan's social and political environment, where Buddhism is the dominant religion and non-Buddhist practices can sometimes be sensitive topics. Unlike in other countries where mosques are available, there are no mosques or formal prayer spaces in Bhutan. As a result, Muslims gather in private homes to observe their daily rituals. During Ramadan, a time of fasting from dawn until sunset, Muslims in Bhutan observe this important religious practice individually or within their families. Although large communal gatherings for prayers might not be possible, some may connect with neighboring Muslim communities in India or Bangladesh for support during the holy month. These religious practices are generally conducted privately, either individually or within family settings, as public expression of Islam is limited in Bhutan. When it comes to the areas where Muslims live, the majority are concentrated in the southern parts of Bhutan, particularly in towns close to the Indian border, such as Phuentsholing, Galefu, and Samdrup Jongkar. These areas have stronger influences from neighboring Muslim-majority countries like India and Bangladesh, and they serve as hubs for trade and migration. Since Bhutan shares borders with these countries, it has attracted migrant workers, many of whom are Muslim, particularly in sectors like construction, agriculture, and business. Phuentsholing, for example, is a bustling town where a significant number of Muslims are involved in commerce, operating small businesses like shops, restaurants, and other enterprises that serve both locals and international customers. While the capital, Thimphu, also has a small Muslim population, it is far less concentrated, and Muslims in the capital typically live there for business or professional reasons. Despite their small numbers, Muslims in Bhutan still observe important religious holidays, such as Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. However, because there are no formal places of worship, these celebrations are usually kept private and held in small family or community gatherings. The Muslim population in Bhutan faces a range of challenges, largely due to their small numbers, their status as a minority religious group, and the cultural and political landscape of the country. Bhutan is predominantly Buddhist, and although the constitution guarantees freedom of religion, the social, legal, and economic environments present difficulties for Muslims in terms of religious expression, community building, and integration into Bhutanese society. One of the main challenges Muslims face is limited religious freedom and expression. While Bhutan's constitution does guarantee freedom of religion, the practice of religions other than Buddhism is often restricted in public spaces. There are no mosques in Bhutan, and Muslims cannot openly build mosques or Islamic centers. This forces them to pray in private, either at home or in small, makeshift spaces. The public display of religious symbols, such as the crescent moon and star, or the calling to prayer, adhan, is not widely accepted. This makes it harder for Muslims to express their faith openly or engage in religious activities as they would in other countries with larger Muslim populations. Another significant problem is the lack of religious infrastructure. With no mosques or Islamic schools, Muslims in Bhutan face difficulties in organizing communal prayers or engaging in religious education. This lack of religious institutions also hampers the development of a cohesive Muslim community, as there are no cultural centers where people can come together and learn about their faith. Without access to Islamic schools, young Muslims in Bhutan grow up with limited access to religious education and must rely on informal family-based teachings. Politically, Muslims in Bhutan have very little representation. The country's political system is predominantly shaped by the monarchy and the Buddhist identity, with non-Buddhist minorities, including Muslims, having minimal representation in the government. There are no Muslim politicians or representatives in Bhutan's government, and their voices are rarely heard in national discussions. Muslims may also face discrimination due to their foreign origins, particularly those from Bangladesh or Nepal, and the stereotypes surrounding Muslims can contribute to social exclusion. Religious and cultural sensitivity also presents challenges. Bhutan's strong Buddhist identity means that religious minorities, including Muslims, must navigate a delicate balance between respecting Bhutanese cultural norms and practicing their own faith. This can lead to tensions or misunderstandings between different religious groups. Additionally, some Islamic practices may conflict with local customs. For example, dietary practices such as halal food or dress codes may not be widely understood, further complicating efforts to integrate into Bhutanese society. The Muslim community in Bhutan is fragmented and geographically dispersed, which makes it difficult to build a unified community. Unlike larger Muslim populations in other countries, where there are mosques and community centers, Muslims in Bhutan lack these foundational structures. This fragmentation exacerbates the sense of isolation and makes it harder to form a cohesive social group. Islamophobia, which refers to prejudice, discrimination, or hostility towards Islam and Muslims, is a global phenomenon that has been particularly visible in certain parts of the world. However, in Bhutan, Islamophobia appears to be less prominent. This can be attributed to the small size of the Muslim population and Bhutan's unique cultural and political landscape. Bhutan is predominantly a Buddhist country, and although it has a strong focus on preserving its Buddhist heritage and identity, there is no widespread, organized Islamophobia or active hostility against Muslims. While Bhutan does have its own challenges when it comes to the integration of its Muslim population, these issues are more related to cultural and religious differences, rather than an organized effort to discriminate or persecute Muslims. There is no evidence of any formal Islamophobic organizations or movements in Bhutan, unlike other parts of the world where Islamophobia is associated with hate groups or political movements. Bhutan does not appear to have any groups that specifically target or promote hostility towards Muslims. The general attitude toward Islam is one of ignorance or unfamiliarity rather than active antagonism. The Buddhist community in Bhutan may simply lack knowledge about Islam. And given that the Muslim population is small and tends to remain private, there is little opportunity for broad public exposure or interaction. When it comes to government policies and the social climate, Bhutan guarantees freedom of religion under its constitution. However, the practical realities of religious freedom in Bhutan can be complex. While Muslims are free to worship privately, they face restrictions when it comes to the public expression of their religion. There are no mosques or Islamic centers in Bhutan, and public displays of Islamic symbols are not widely accepted. This means that while Muslims can practice their faith privately, they do not have the same rights as other religious groups to express their beliefs openly. This restriction on religious expression is more about the cultural sensitivity of the country than overt acts of Islamophobia. The social integration of Muslims in Bhutan is also limited. Given that Muslims form such a small minority, they are often socially isolated, particularly in rural areas. The lack of large-scale efforts to integrate Muslim communities into the broader Bhutanese society means that cultural and religious differences are often more pronounced. However, this isolation does not necessarily translate into overt hostility or Islamophobia, but rather into feelings of marginalization and alienation. The lack of interfaith dialogue or cultural exchange can also perpetuate misunderstandings between Buddhists and Muslims. But again, this is more about a lack of engagement than active discrimination. And that's a wrap for today's video. I hope you enjoyed the story and found it as captivating as I did. If you want to hear more gripping tales like this one, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.